So next up, we're going to do a quick little video on sightlines, which was requested. And I think I'm going to start by doing basic sightlines. Now, I've just thrown down a hole here based on what you can see in the land. And you've got to realize, first of all, that the view you see here, when you're looking at it and thinking, this hole looks great, that's not what you see when you go to play. So if we have a little look at playing this hole, you'll notice that what we see is nothing like that. And this is something, when reviewing, we see all the time. We see bunkers that aren't visible. We see the fact that, you can see where the fairway is, but I've got no idea where this hole goes from this view. And yes, I have a scout cam, and yes, I can move the camera up and down, and yes, I can load up this, but that doesn't excuse the fact that this sightline is awful. So what we're going to do is going to quickly try to improve that. And in the first of these little videos, I'm going to do a couple. We're going to focus on major moves. So what do you really need to ensure? Well, first of all, you want to have an idea of whether your hole is uphill or downhill and to what extent. So our driver landing zone is roughly 12 feet uphill. That's okay. Uphill drives are easy to make visible if you're careful with them. And then our green is slightly further uphill than that. Again, also helpful. And that will certainly help these two greenside bunkers, because the green being uphill from the fairway means that we've got some space to drop these down. However, even from the fairway, you'll notice that, okay, the sightline to the green is fine, but I can't see that front bunker at all. So I guess point one is you've got to always be looking, and you'll see those of us design on Twitch or YouTube, you'll see us constantly leaping back to check this sort of sightline. Now, the moves that we're going to make are going to rely on a couple of brushes. So you want to be going with the fuzzy ones where possible. And with your bunkers, a lot of people try to get around this by just raising the back of them. And that helps, and you want to do that for sure. But as you'll see, that doesn't really make it visible when we go down to here. What does make it visible, though, is lowering the land a bit more in front of them. So doing that, and suddenly we're getting closer. And every time you zoom out to here, it's got to be worth working out what part of land is it that's blocking your view. And in this case, it's this bit. Now, I think I might run into some water plane issues here, but we'll see. Yeah. So if you do this is probably, I guess, a useful one. If you do run into something like this, it's good to take one of these brushes, make it really, really big, and just raise the whole thing itself. And that gets rid of that, because where the whole of the inside of the hole is 5 feet, but you won't really notice any changes outside because this edge of the brush is really fuzzy. So it won't really, if we're moving it around the land, you can kind of see it's raising up gradually. Everything inside this brush is going up 5 feet, but then the actual raise itself is relatively imperceptible around the edges. Now we can use the same brush for a different effect. Let's say part of what tends to get in the way is this area between fairway and tee. Well, let's dip that. So I'm going to take this same brush. Remember, this is something I learned from Eric, I think, Victory Lane Sports. The idea of making this brush stretch between tee and fairway, or really wherever you want. Let's make it right to there. So it's not really touching the area it's touching none of your playable area. And you drop it down a little bit, and that creates a small sort of valley, relatively straightforward. Equally, you can take this brush, so you've got an epicenter here, and it's going to be fuzzier all the way to here, so it's having less an impact here than it's having. Let's say it's got 100% impact on the inside and 0% on the outside, and middle will be like 50% impact. So let's say I raised something by 8 feet, the middle was coming up 8 feet, the very epicenter. The middle of the fuzzier bit is going up 4.5 feet at this point, and then 0. And you can kind of see that with what the brush is doing, but if you want the mathematical way of doing it, it's roughly that. Now with all these brushes, I'll roughly advanced edit them so they're doing what I want them to do. So if I know I want this bit at the front to come down loads and then gradually sloping up here, I think for this sightline, what will help is a gradual slope up the fairway. So we'll do that. And you can see how that slowly starts having an impact. And we can do it over our bunker as well, because that's going to sort of sculpt the bunker for us. Now we're getting there, we're not quite there yet. Now I might decide, just to make my life a little bit easier, well, let's dip the land a bit in front of the bunker, and let's raise the land a bit behind the bunker. And one of the things you'll have seen us talk about as well is Try to create hills so that your bunkers feel like they make sense. Well, suddenly now we have a sightline to a bunker that hasn't really required that much work. Now, we probably want to do the same with the second one. Now, layering bunkers can be tricky because you want to make it so that it's not only visible off the tee, but also so that both of them are visible. That's a solid start. It would need some more work. But let's say we want this whole bunker to be visible. Well, again, it comes back to understanding your tools. Well, with this one, we're going to take that overbrush again, and we're going to put it pretty much all the way around the bunker. I think maybe think about what bit you want to be raising. Well, I probably want the bottom of the bunker to be roughly level with the fairway, so I don't want that to be raised. But everything else, sure. Let's raise that up. You can go back to your T view, see what it's looking like. Straight away, I mean, everything on this hole is awful, the shapes, etc. But it gives you an idea of how you can use the tools. Now, you'd probably also want to make it so that that bunker and that hill move with the land around it a little bit better. These are all very rough moves, and I would sort them out more later, but gives you an idea of what you're doing. And I might flatten just to make those moves make a little more sense. Not great, but gives you an idea of how we can sculpt a sightline. So we can now see that. We can see all of the fairway, and if we contrast that to where we started, it's better. There's this hill on the right-hand side. Don't much care for that, so we're going to lose that. I mean, you could mound it up, but in all honesty, probably flattening it down makes the most sense. And there's our sightline there. Now, if we're going to here, well, again, let's figure out what our problem is, and then which way is the better way to solve it. So with our tee, we could have solved the same issue by simply raising the tee up 30 feet. Would have worked. We could have just done this and gone even up 10 feet, and oh look, there's a sightline. It's better because this is higher. You then end up with every tee shot being downhill, and it's important that you're able to generate sightlines on both uphill and downhill holes. Now here, the question's got to be, do we want to get around this bunker by lowering the land in front of it, or raising the land behind it, or a combination of both? I'd probably go for a combination of both. So to raise the green, we're again going to enclose the whole thing for the moment. Let's go up 1'7", and let's dip, particularly this hill in front of it is the offending item. I'm going to dip that down a bit. And then this bit of fairway here. And straight away we can see those hazards. Now, when you're looking at it from the team now, and this has been very rough and ready, we're what, 8 minutes in. It's not perfect, but can you see both bunkers? Yeah. When we hit down to there, are we going to be able to see the green and the hazards that presents? Absolutely. So it's really about making sensible big moves and making sure that those really give the golfer what you want them to see off the tee. Now, none of this is good. I am not trying to claim that this is a good hole. It's me messing around with the sculpting tool for 5 minutes. It's not going to be great. And there are many, many bits that I would change, and I don't like the hole to begin with. But with all that said and done, it does give you an idea of how you might go about using those tools and how they can help you to generate the first part of a sightline. So, yeah, in terms of how I would go about this, really it's making those big moves sensibly and thinking about, rather to generate a sightline, the main thing has got to be, can you see where you're hitting? Can you see what the challenge is off the tee? If all I can see is blindness, then that's just, it's not good. There's no two ways about it. There's a difference between a blind shot that you intend, which can be great, and a blind shot which you don't, which will never be good. And it's hard to explain. I've tried a number of times on the forums, but really it's to do with intent. Are you meaning that has to be seen? Are you meaning it to be blind? If you're meaning it to be blind, is that met with suitable risk reward? Are you suitably giving enough freedom off the tee? If a blind tee shot is blind, are there hazards in play that you can't see? And if so, are they fair? And yes, blind tee shots, there's a big part of that that's to do with unfairness. But bunkers like these that are in play off the tee, you should be viewing those every single time. You should be viewing this landing zone. 99 times out of 100, you should be viewing landing zone, you should be viewing green zone. And when you don't, it's got to make sense. So that's a few of the main ways I'll use to make a sightline. It's not great, but it gives you something to look at.